I would drive straight out of the classroom, inhale the sandwich. I am the face of it. You have to self-reflect so much, get used to completely relying on yourself.
This is the Education Business Podcast for all founders and business owners in the education sector. This podcast is for you if you have an education business or you're thinking about starting one. That could be tutoring, publishing, holiday clubs. It really doesn't matter. You're in business and you're also in education. But most of all, you're focused on improving outcomes for children in the way you know best, through your business. I'm Claire Riley, co-founder of educational resources website Classroom Secrets, and I'll be sharing how to make your education business bigger, better, and have more impact through my own experiences and also the conversations I have with other founders and business owners in education. The Education Business Podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets, helping you to support your children's learning. Emily, welcome to the Education Business Podcast. So just like most of the guests that I interview on this podcast, you were a teacher once upon a time, and now you're in business. So how did that come about? How did you get into teaching in the first place? Why did you decide to leave? And how did you get into business?
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here. And yeah, I'll cut to the chase. So yes, I started off as a teacher. I had a very traditional route to it. I did my English degree at Birmingham, and then I went to Cambridge for my PGCE, and it was an early primary specialism. So I'm qualified across primary, but there was a lot of focus on early years and year 1 and year 2. Now, I went straight from that into the classroom. I taught reception, and Cambridge offered this program. I don't know if they still do it, but at the time you could go back within 5 years and get an MEd. And so I always had dreams of doing that, because at Cambridge you don't formally graduate from a PGC because it's not a degree. So I didn't get to do the whole thing at Senate House. So of course I wanted an MEd, but I also desperately wanted to be able to do the Senate House graduation and the bowing and all the gowns and things. So also for the academic qualification, of course, but I also really wanted to do the graduation. So I went back to doing an MEd, and it was alongside virtually a full-time classroom role. I think I did technically 90%, and I had like an hour and a half off on a Wednesday, if I recall. And I was commuting at that point. We'd left Cambridge by then. So I would drive straight out of the classroom, inhale the sandwich, and then drive to Cambridge and then work all evening. It was into the evening, and I just couldn't cope with it alongside it was effectively a full-time classroom role. I still had full responsibility. My TA, my wonderful TA at the time, covered the class, but it wasn't like a job share or anything like that. So I still had full responsibility, really. So I decided that I just couldn't complete my MEd while still balancing classroom responsibilities. And so I left the classroom with the intention of going back, but I left and I went and worked in higher education instead. I did schools outreach. So it was widening participation was the role. It was amazing. It was a maternity cover. I would have stayed a lot longer had it not been. And I would go out to schools and work with children who were likely to become NEET, or perhaps children with a really big interest in an area. I did a really cool archaeological dig with some year 5s and some actual archaeologists. I was not the one doing the digging, but and took them to this dig near me, and it was so cool, and actually really, really loved it. And the role itself, it was in student recruitment, but the university is quite small, so I was very nearby the marketing team, and we crossed over quite a bit. I was even in their prospectus once, modelled as a student, because I could still pass as vaguely young. I didn't have children yet. I realised I loved it, and decided, you know what, actually, I'm going to carry on, and went and worked in another universities for a while. I did some youth work as well. I did some youth coordination for a charity locally, and really spread my wings a bit with education. And somewhere along this line, COVID happened. I was pregnant with our oldest daughter, and she's now at school herself. So it's a bit of a blur, the exact dates, but I'd started freelancing in marketing with an education specialism, and really, really enjoyed it. And it just grew and grew and grew very organically. The plan had never been to set up an entire business and company, but it became that, which is what we are today. So I still do the vast majority of all the work. I am the face of it, and I do all the client communication and the vast majority of the work. But I've expanded it a little bit to be able to offer more to clients. So recently a client wanted some banner designs for an expo, which I do graphic design, but it was a little bit beyond what I did. So I brought on a lovely graphic designer whose specialism is also education. So becoming a company kind of gave us a little bit more flexibility with what we can offer. And that's what Emmerlilly Digital is today.
I don't think I've met an entrepreneur who hasn't just been open to the next opportunity presented to them. Most people I speak to did not set out to start a business. That's why we don't really start businesses when we're 16, I think. We wait and we try things, and it's just a very entrepreneurial thing, isn't it? Taking the next step, trying something new, leaning into something that you enjoy and something that you feel that adds value and that you're good at. So you mentioned that you started as a freelancer. What were the key challenges in the transition then to create an actual business where you take on team members? Because we can talk about it sort of in one sentence, can't we, as an entrepreneur? But that takes so much grit, so much resilience, so much hard work. What have the key challenges been in that transition for you?
So key challenges going from freelance to more of a company. Gosh. Well, I think I'm still in the process of doing it. So while I am a company and I have a team around me that helps on some projects, I'm still doing a lot of the work myself. So it's getting into the mindset of that I don't need to be the only one. Because when you're freelance, you are so used to doing things in isolation a lot of the time, especially when it's direct to client. You can't kind of turn somebody at your desk and ask them what their take is. You just can get used to completely relying on yourself because that's the nature of it a lot of the time. So moving from that perspective to more of a team and more that Emmerlilly exists outside of just me. When you're freelance, you, for the most part, you are your business. You're tightly connected, and I still am, but I'm trying to change the mindset that it can be its own entity, and I think then we can deliver so much more to clients. When it's just me, I was always limited by my own time capacity and my key skill set, for example. So I know a lot of marketing, but there are projects where I would just say no to them because it might go beyond the scope of what I know, and where I'm like, right, I could do this, but I know that there's somebody who could do this better. I would have just said no, but now I've got a team around me that can come in. So a great example lately, we had a really, really lovely client who was going to an expo and needed banners designed. And I could have done it, but I knew that it did push the boundaries of my skill set. And so we had a graphic designer come in and help us, who's an education specialist, and she's amazing. And being able to be collaborative in that and trust that she knew what she was doing. She has her own business, and not having to micromanage it and think, there's a reason I brought on an extra person here because they know better than I do. And I think also leaning into that, trusting others. When you're freelance, you rely solely on yourself, right? Then when you expand a little bit, you have to let go of the control, which is hard getting your head around that. But that's been another challenge, sort of letting go and accepting that there's a reason you source and find incredible other freelancers that have built up a skill set that is beneficial to your company. And therefore you need to trust them that they'll do a great job, and they know more than you. They'll ask questions that you wouldn't have thought to ask. That's the whole point of bringing on somebody that extends beyond what you can do, because they bring in expertise. So getting my head around that has been a challenge, but I never see it as a negative thing. I love learning. As you can guess, because I'm an education specialist, I always say that if I won the lottery, I would just do degree after degree after degree and PhD after PhD. I adore stretching my mind. So it's not like a negative challenge. It's just something that is my latest thing that I'm learning, like expanding a team and trusting other skill sets beyond my own.
You mentioned how important it is to grow and allow people into your space, allow experts to come in and help you with things that they know better about. And I absolutely agree with you. Just an insight that I thought was worth adding is that actually every person you take on, you can learn from them. That might be that they're employed, or it could be that they're freelance. But there is an opportunity to learn from absolutely every person, and not just about what they're doing, and not just about their expertise, but also from a leadership perspective as well. But if you do learn about what they're doing, you're not going to learn about it to a level where you're going to then perhaps take that job on. But it makes you a better business owner just by having that overarching knowledge of what expertise they can bring into your business. And you will learn through the questions that that person is bringing in. And so that's a really good way for everyone to think about it as well, that every person brings an opportunity to learn more, which is helpful in the long run. So what does success look like for you then with your business? Is it growth? Is it knowledge? Freedom? Impact? Or is it something else?
Oh, I totally agree. I think one of the reasons I've loved building my business so much is because it's a constant learning process. And I love learning through books and study, but there's something about practical learning from other people in the industry that can't be replaced. I mean, you bring somebody on to help you the project. Again, a great example is a graphic designer. She had questions that I just wouldn't have thought of asking. And it just builds your life experience and it just builds your brain up. I totally agree. I love it. I'd be interested to know what experiences you have in that area, any sort of particular things that you've learned from when with employees or freelancers or anything like that that just stand out for you. And what does success look like for me? I think in my current life stage, because we have 2 young children, it is continued flexibility. So not working every single hour of the day and late nights and weekends. That's just not the life stage I'm in. So it's having a manageable, regular, ongoing client workload while still feeling like I can be there for my girls, because that's really important. And it's a luxury that a lot of people, because of their work structure and that they have little choice over, don't get to enjoy. And it's really, really fortunate and privileged to be able to sort of command my calendar to an extent. So just continuing that is a success for me. And also just getting to work with really, really cool brands and individuals and learning about different companies and how they work and where they've gone from maybe like a startup to being a really successful company and having a fantastic product that really changes lives. Just being able to be involved in those companies and learning about them is a success in itself. I've learned so much in the years of doing Emmerlilly that I'd never would have been able to dream of just being on the consumer side, but being able to work in a business to business capacity is another success in itself, and just continuing to enjoy it. I love what I do. And I hope that that never ends. So success for me also is just having a really great time while building something.
What a great question. I struggled really to think, what are the top 3 things that I've learned? When you employ people or you work with freelancers or even like little companies, you have different things that you learn. Sometimes you learn specific things from individuals. Sometimes you learn things as a theme. And sometimes you'll learn things because what you expected to happen isn't happening. And so I thought, what are the top 3 things? So the first one that I learned is about HR and people management. I did not really know how to manage people at all. I've never been an official leader. In terms of leadership skills, we all have leadership skills. I did have a natural flair for leadership, but sometimes that doesn't correlate with people management. So I learned a lot about people management from HR people that have joined us in the business. I learned about the importance of research. So it's not something that we did much of. And data as well. We weren't great at using data. I've learned a lot more about that. You can only get to so far in your business when you're not focused on that. So that would be another thing. And the third thing is that small business shouldn't be corporate. So we've brought people in before that have been too corporate for the environment that we had or wanted to create as well. Systems and processes doesn't mean that you have to be really corporate. And so I would say that is the third lesson for me. So you've talked about success revolving around flexibility with your family, and I can resonate with that. I also have two girls, they're in primary school, and I, as much as possible, try and not work when they're around. Actually, having children was a great shift for me in the number of hours that I did work in a helpful way. It made me realise what I needed from the business as well as what I was giving to the business. For other founders who want that same balance of family and flexibility and meaningful work, like you've said, what advice would you give to them so that they can create it intentionally rather than just by accident?
That is a great question. And the flexibility of my business, less happened by accident, but was very organic because I set up formally, properly, shortly after my oldest was born. So like I said, it started freelance, it grew and grew, but it had to grow around her. So I made it work because that's all the time I had. Um, so it was intentional in the sense that I needed it to be, but I didn't kind of set out and think I want to create something that directly fits around my children, if that makes sense. It was designed out of necessity. If I was starting from scratch, say advice to somebody who is in a full-time role and wants to, whether it's a side hustle that they're going to eventually turn into a business or they want to start something completely fresh, then I'd say boundaries are incredibly important. I think especially when you're self-employed or just starting out, especially if it's a client model, if you're a service, you are so eager and keen to make it work that you will say yes to everything that comes your way. I mean, that was certainly the case for me. Once upon a time, I worked with all sorts of clients, and it would be very much, and often you don't have the choice. If you need to pay your bills and you're being offered work, you take it. But I think having clear boundaries from the beginning can be really helpful because especially when you're freelance or you're in kind of this contractual thing, um, roles can get blurry. It can be, if things aren't contractually put down, it can be really easy to work more than you initially agreed. So I think boundaries are incredibly important. I think starting with a strong contract is a great place to do that through. So I think I'll speak for many freelancers. When I very first started out, I had an incredibly basic contract. Whereas now I have a much more robust one. Whenever I send it to a client, I always feel like I need to apologize. I'm like, this is going to be a lot of reading. Sorry. Had some incredible lawyers write it for me. But having it all written down where you're really clear with, like, these are my working hours, right? If you say have children at school and you're like, right, I work 9 till 3, you can put that in a contract and make that really clear from the beginning. I appreciate that's not always a luxury everybody has when they're first starting out, but the sooner you can start instilling clear boundaries, the better. If you're creating something and you're in charge of how it grows, you're in charge of the hours for the most part. So being clear with when you work, and you can put it in your email signature. You can, I see some really great ones where they're along the lines of, here are my hours. I appreciate they might not be the same as yours. I will respond to you when I'm working again. Equally, a lot of parents may find themselves, if they're freelance or starting a business, they're sort of working around nap times or when the children have gone to bed, which we know isn't ideal, but it is reality often. Having something in your email signature that says, these are my hours. Sometimes I work in the evenings. But I don't expect you to reply within those hours as well. The boundaries, I think, is incredibly important, making it clear from the beginning when you work and when you will respond accordingly. And also looking at the finances of what you need to earn as a director or as a sole trader and working out, therefore, if I need to earn X amount of money per month, here's what I need to charge on an hourly rate, or here's what I need to charge my services so that I can make that amount of money. So you can see a fair price, because then it also helps you decide, right, is this client worth working with? Because they want 20 hours, of me a month, but their rate's very low and I'm going to be giving up on other work for that. It's really hard, but it's kind of being quite mindful of when you're available, your boundaries and what you charge, I think, are really important ones. That will be my first advice.
Do you teach children as part of your business offering? Have you considered using resources from Classroom Secrets? At Classroom Secrets, we're always adding new resources for a range of subjects, and we're keen to hear your suggestions for resources too. We know that you didn't go into business to work more hours than you did in the classroom. You went into business to give you freedom. Let us help with that. Visit classroomsecrets.co.uk to sign up. So as someone who does work only within school hours then, what does the typical working day look like for you? Or even the typical working half term, because we've got half term holidays.
Oh, a typical day. Well, to caveat a few things. Firstly, I have a husband who's very equally shared with childcare. So that's I'm very fortunate to have that. And also, I have some employed hours with an old client. So I juggle everything. And I wouldn't say it's just school hours. While I'm there when my children wake up and get them to school and I'm there at drop off until they go to bed, I do sometimes find myself working in the evening if it's been particularly busy. But the average day would look like getting everybody up, sending them off to school or nursery if it's a nursery day, and then working hardcore up until drop off or pick up. Sometimes we have after school club. And we also, my husband will often do pick up and collect both of them so that I can work longer. But it's definitely a juggle. I think I work quite quickly and that never compromises quality. But I think it's like a really harsh workout trying to condense hours into school hours. I'm so much more productive than I ever was pre-children. I think pre-children, I would spread it out. I probably grab a coffee, make it a lot more spread out. But when you've got less time, I'm just so much more productive and I don't procrastinate. I'm like really focused. And I think that forces a really good level of staying on task. So it's a case of working really hardcore in the school hours and then sometimes working evenings and support of a very, very equal partner who often does drop-offs and collections so that I can work more. So if he takes them to nursery and school, I might then work from early, like at 7:30, and then work later when he picks them up and vice versa. It's a juggle and it's come from a lot of practice of having less time than I did pre-children. That's kind of a typical day. And if I'm really lucky, I'll squeeze a run in. And I'll probably have an audiobook on at the same time because I'm always habit stacking. I'd be interested to hear what it's like for you as well.
There's a lot I could say here. I feel like I lean into novelty. So I'm always looking at changing up what the schedule could be. On reflection, it's kind of interesting that the school run plan we've actually run for over a year, which is unusual. Normally we've changed it up by then. Obviously led by me because I'm the one who loves the novelty. So I do the morning school run 4 days a week and get the kids ready as well. And I used to be somebody who would get out of bed and start working straight away. That was probably one of the hardest things I found when I first had children. And so I've kind of trained myself out of that, which is interesting. And I have other things I like to do in the morning that are not work related, that are more personal development related. So I kind of lean into that instead. I do try and make sure that I work in school hours, occasionally work on a weekend, but it's not usual. Sometimes that is in the school holidays. Sometimes we will get up earlier in the school holidays to do some work or do specific days. It's the school holidays now and we're having one day where my mum's having the kids and we're doing some founders stuff. That's another thing. We have founders days. That's really helped actually because there are some things that we need to do together or I need Ed to be available for. And when he stepped into the CEO role, he was having loads of meetings and I avoid meetings because I find meetings really, really hard. If I've got too many meetings, I can't find the motivation to get things done. I love people, but it's got to be in moderation for me because it really drains my energy. So the Founders Days have been really helpful to get those important things over the line that you can easily push on as well. That I also use Motion. I've talked about it a lot before. It's a really amazing tool. you put in all your tasks and it will tell you what to do when. I don't necessarily follow it, but it gives me a guide of when things need to be done by and helps me get the inspiration for things that need to be done now rather than things that don't need to be done for another 3 weeks, because I would lean into what I wanted to do rather than what needed to be done. So it helps me keep on track, especially with like the podcast where I have to make sure things are done for a certain time. So yeah, I always feel like there's too much to do. I think we all do. It didn't go away that when I left teaching. I'm still always trying to help my future self and try and get my list of tasks down. And it never happens. It's just this constant treadmill that we're on, isn't it? It's something I'm still working on, and I don't see it as ever being finished. I see it as something I'm always trying to refine for who I am right now and how it's working for my family in the moment. I think when we try and come up with this thing and finish it, it's never going to work in that way. But anyway, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. You've given us so many valuable insights. And I know that particularly for people who are starting a business in education, this will be really helpful to them. In your mind, what have we not talked about that we should have talked about that would be really useful for education business owners to know?
Those are both really good tips for things to use. So I so frequently put business development to the bottom of my to-do list. I'm always focusing on the client stuff. And I love the thought of a founder's day to actually set a whole day aside just for business development. I've learned that this year. Now we're a company and there's more than just me. I'm like, right, I really have to make sure that I continually develop Emmerlilly, not just my clients. So that is a really good tip. And I had not heard of Motion. I use Notion, but I hadn't heard of Motion. That sounds really, really good because I just prioritize my own tasks and don't really put much thought into it. I also like the productivity method by Grace Beverly, the quick ticks and that side of things. I think it really helps neurodivergent brains. So I need to look into that as well more. In terms of what we haven't spoken about, I hear so often from friends who are still in the classroom and want to do something maybe alongside it or want to build a company or a business as a way to move away from in-person classroom teaching. And so frequently the mindset is, it's so different. I've done this my whole life. How can I transition to that? And there's a huge mindset shift that needs to happen. So I'd love to hear what your main tips are on somebody having the impetus to set something up alongside classroom teaching or start afresh and get over that very real hurdle and fear that there is when you've spent nearly all your career in the school system, which is, it has a lot of similarities, but it's very much like its own microcosm, and it's sometimes very hard to see yourself outside of it, even if you're still part-time in it, if that makes sense. So I'd love to hear any tips you have for teachers experiencing that. Because my main tip I always say is if you can afford to start it up alongside, that's a great start because you've still got a balance of both and you'll quickly learn what life is like outside the classroom and you'll probably get a taste for it. And I always say your skills are very transferable, even if it feels like perhaps the only place you could work is in the classroom, that your skills are incredibly valuable and transferable. But I'd love to hear what take you have on that.
You know, when people leave teaching, a common theme is they're not in control, that they cannot control how things are, and that the system or the school or the head teacher or the leaders are controlling things and they want to take back control. And I just want to sort of put a pin in that because you mentioned that teachers have transferable skills, and I'm not denying that. I think that's true. But when that's coupled with this fear of being controlled or not being in control, that's not a good mindset for starting a business, whether you're still in the classroom or whether you've left. So it brings me back to mindset. We have to have the right mindset for starting a business. And I could give you a list of books to go listen to, but I actually think it comes down to being curious and being open. So in education, things can be quite narrow-minded. It's not anybody's fault, it's the way things have evolved. But even if teachers bring a new idea, often it's shut down. There's no newness in things, there's no openness to try something new. But in business, that's everything you need to be in terms of mindset. So if somebody's thinking about making the switch or the starting, the most important thing is to ask yourself the question of, am I willing to change my mind? Am I willing to have my mind changed? The perceptions that I have about things, am I willing to have new perceptions? Am I willing to see things a bit differently from the way I see them now? Because that's how you grow a business, by being open to changing you rather than changing things on the outside. Business is the biggest personal development tool for facing yourself every single day. And when you've been in business for, I'm not even sure how many years now, 14 years or something, it's so interesting to talk to older people because you can sort of see their experience in the business world, and it kind of depends on what they've done in their life to how much they understand themselves. And it's really an interesting journey. So that would be my big thing. I would say open your mind to other things, open your mind to being wrong, open your mind to different ways of doing things. And that will help you with the fear, because the reason why we feel the fear is because that person who we are, who is narrow-minded, cannot get the results that we want to get, because that's impossible. And so we have to change who we are in order to grow the business that we want to grow. Emily, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thanks for asking me some questions too. I feel like I've been interviewed, and I hope everyone has a really great week.
I love what you said about a common stark difference between having a business and being in the classroom, because I experienced that 100%, and I'd actually never reflected on it, comparing it to business life, because I had a gap between leaving the classroom and setting up. I worked in-house. It's so true, especially those that decide to leave. They're perhaps not happy with the senior leadership team, or they feel stifled. They want to be creative because, most teachers are incredibly creative people. That's part of the joy of the job. And it's so hard feeling creatively stifled. In contrast to that's literally how you run and keep a business going. You have to be constantly changing, creative, looking at new ways to do things, seeing that something didn't work, trying something new. That's definitely how Emmerlilly has grown. It's how I started, for certain. So I love that you said that. It's such a good point. And yeah, it is so true about having to grow yourself. I mean, I think the two most fundamental things in what have grown me as a person is having my girls, hugely grown me, and also having my business, because you have to self-reflect so much. You have to look really closely at your own weaknesses. You have to fail. You have to pick yourself up. It's not easy, as I'm sure all of your guests who own businesses will say, but it's a huge journey of self-development. So I totally agree there. Thank you for having me. And of course, I asked you questions. I want to learn from you just as much as I love to share what I do. So thank you for having me. It's been a real joy. And I hope, what we've said is useful to somebody.
Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets. To find more resources to grow your business, visit classroomsecrets.co.uk.